The house that watched me sleep was never just a home, it was a presence that lingered in the spaces between dreams and waking. It stood on the edge of a lonely hill wrapped in the quiet arms of the forest, and every night it whispered something I could not quite understand. When I first arrived there was nothing extraordinary about it. The pale walls, the creaking floors, the windows that looked like tired eyes all seemed harmless, yet beneath that silence there was something breathing, something old and patient watching as I moved from room to room. I remember the first night I slept there, the air felt heavy like the world was holding its breath, and I kept thinking I could hear soft footsteps echoing somewhere above my head. Though I was alone, I told myself it was the wind or the house settling into its bones, but deep down I knew it was neither. I felt it in the way the shadows stretched too far, in the way the curtains stirred even when there was no breeze. The moonlight fell across my bed in thin silver lines like fingers tracing the edges of a secret, and I could not shake the feeling that if I closed my eyes for too long something would lean close enough to listen to my heartbeat. Every morning the house greeted me with stillness, the air cold and the smell of damp wood drifting through the hallways. The furniture looked as though it had been waiting centuries for someone to return. The clocks did not tick, the mirrors seemed to hold a faint shimmer of movement like they remembered faces that no longer existed. Sometimes I would find small changes, things I could not explain. The chair by the fireplace turned slightly, the pages of a book opened to a different line, the candle wax melted though I had not lit it. I would tell myself that time plays tricks on lonely places, but the truth is I began to feel the weight of eyes on my back whenever I walked past the stairs. It was like the house knew me better each day, like it was learning the rhythm of my breathing, the shape of my thoughts. The second night I dreamt that I was standing at the bottom of those same stairs, and a voice was calling my name in a tone so gentle that it almost felt kind, but when I tried to see who it was I could only make out a faint light coming from the top step like a lantern swaying in slow circles. I woke with my throat dry and the taste of dust on my tongue. My window was open though I had shut it tight before sleeping, and outside the forest was utterly silent, not even the sound of crickets or wind, just silence, pure and endless silence. I lay there frozen for hours watching the faint outline of the ceiling shift with the pale light of dawn, and when I finally rose I felt the floorboards pulse beneath my feet as though the house itself had a heartbeat. Days passed, but they did not feel like days. They folded into one another like pages in a book I could not stop reading. Each night the same dream came back, a little clearer than before. Sometimes the light on the stairs grew brighter, sometimes I could hear a soft hum coming from behind the walls, a song with no words that drifted through the rooms and lingered just long enough to make me shiver. I started to speak to the house softly at first, just to fill the silence. I would say things like "good morning" or "I'm still here," and sometimes I thought it answered in the way a door would sigh or a curtain would move slightly. Though there was no breeze, I began to leave notes on the table, just short messages written in pencil. I do not know why, maybe to prove to myself that I was still real, but by morning the notes were gone, and in their place I would find a faint mark on the paper like something had traced over my handwriting with invisible fingers. One evening as the sun melted into the horizon and painted the sky in the color of fading embers, I stood outside the house and looked at it from a distance. It looked alive, the windows flickering faintly as if blinking, and I realized with a strange calm that I had never seen anyone else come up this hill. No traveler, no animal, no echo of life beyond the boundaries of this property. The road below curved away into the fog, and I could not even remember when I had last seen another person. The realization came like a cold wave. Maybe I had always been here, maybe I was just another story the house told itself. When the night got too lonely I wanted to leave, but something kept me there, not fear, not curiosity, but a quiet pull like gravity whispering, "Stay just one more night." That night I could not sleep. I sat by the window watching the forest shimmer in the half-light, and then I saw it, a figure standing near the tree line, unmoving, silent, its face hidden by shadow. I blinked and it was gone, but the moment I turned back to my room I saw the reflection of that same figure in the glass, its outline faint but undeniable behind me inside the house. I did not turn around, I could not move. My body felt like it had turned to stone, and my breath caught somewhere deep inside me. The reflection in the window remained still for a long long moment, and then slowly it began to fade, melting into the dim light until all that was left was my own trembling shadow. I stood there listening to the quiet house around me, the faint ticking of something unseen, the creak of wood beneath invisible feet, and I realized that the silence was no longer empty. It was watching me. It had shape and weight and warmth like a breath against my skin. I whispered to the darkness, asking who was there, but my voice sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone else. The air seemed to shift in response, a ripple through the unseen corners, and a whisper came so faint I thought it might be inside my own mind. Not yet, it said, not yet. From that night on, sleep became a stranger. I would lie in bed with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling and feeling the slow heartbeat of the house pulsing beneath the floor. I began to see small things that should not have been there, faint handprints on the walls, the impression of someone sitting at the end of my bed, a shape that vanished when I blinked. Once I found a single strand of hair on the pillow beside me, long and silver. Though my own hair was dark, I told myself that it was just imagination, that loneliness can make anything real, but the truth lived somewhere deeper, a truth that I did not dare name. The dreams continued, but they grew sharper, more alive. I could see the top of the stairs now, and the light was no longer still. It swayed gently as though carried by unseen hands, and every time it moved I could hear faint footsteps descending closer and closer until I would wake with the echo of them still ringing in my ears. The mornings brought no relief. The house looked innocent again, drenched in gold light and soft shadows, yet I could feel the exhaustion in my bones. I began to notice the house breathing in rhythm with me. When I exhaled, the windows fogged slightly as if the whole structure sighed along. Sometimes I thought I could hear words buried beneath the walls, fragments of sentences that made no sense, whispers like "she's awake and not much longer." I started to count the steps of the staircase each day, hoping the numbers would remain the same, but they did not. One day there were 14, the next 12, once even 11, as though the house was rearranging itself, quietly shifting its bones to confuse me. I tried to leave once. I packed a small bag and walked down the hill toward the road, but when I reached the end of the path there was nothing beyond it, only fog, thick and endless, swallowing everything. I threw a stone into it and never heard it land. The sound simply vanished, and when I turned around, the house was there behind me, closer than it should have been, its windows wide open as if it had been waiting for me to come back. I walked toward it without meaning to, like something had taken hold of my feet, and I found myself standing once more in the doorway, breathing in the familiar scent of dust and wood and silence. That night the dream was different. I was no longer watching the stairs I was on and walking upward toward the faint light. Each step creaked softly and the walls whispered with voices overlapping in tones that almost sounded kind, almost human. When I reached the top there was a door half open and a pale glow leaking through the crack. I pushed it gently and inside I saw a bed identical to mine and someone lying there asleep. I stepped closer and when the figure turned I saw my own face, my own body resting quietly, eyes closed, lips slightly parted, and the air around me grew colder. I tried to speak but no sound came out, and then the figure in the bed opened its eyes and looked straight at me with a calmness that froze my blood. I woke up gasping, the room dark and the window open again. For days after that dream I could not bear to look into mirrors, because each time I did I felt as though the reflection hesitated a second longer than I did, moving just slightly out of sync. I would blink and it would catch up, but that heartbeat of delay made my skin crawl. Sometimes the reflection smiled faintly when I did not. I stopped looking altogether. I started writing everything down, small details to keep myself anchored, how many steps I took, how many doors I passed, how the air felt on my skin. But even the pages began to betray me. The words shifted slightly when I reread them, letters rearranged into sentences I did not write, things like "you are almost home" and "keep the window open tonight." One evening the sky turned the color of smoke and rain began to fall soft and slow, and I thought maybe it would wash the silence away. I stood at the window watching the drops trace crooked lines down the glass, and then I saw it again, the figure at the edge of the forest, only this time it began to move closer, step by step, with unnatural stillness, as if the world bent around it. I wanted to look away but could not, and when lightning flashed across the sky I saw its face for the first time. It was mine, not as I was but as I might be, years older, eyes hollow and full of light, and in that moment I understood that whatever the house was, it was showing me something, or maybe becoming me. The thunder rolled like a slow breath and the power went out, the candles flickered, and I heard footsteps behind me, steady, deliberate, moving closer across the floor. I turned, but there was nothing, only the long corridor stretching into darkness, yet I could feel warmth on the back of my neck as though someone was standing there breathing softly. I whispered, "Please stop," but the sound of my own voice broke like glass, and the whisper that came back was my own voice saying, "It's too late." Part 3. I stood frozen in the dark room, the walls pulsing faintly with a dim glow that seemed to come from within the wood itself, as if veins of light ran beneath the surface. I could hear the heartbeat of the house, now clear and steady, and it was matching mine beat for beat. I moved slowly through the hallway, my hand brushing the wall, feeling the faint warmth that throbbed there like skin breathing. The whispers were all around me, low and endless, rising and falling in a rhythm that felt almost like chanting my own name, repeating again and again until it no longer sounded like me but like something ancient, something belonging to the house itself. I reached the bottom of the stairs and looked up. The faint light was there again, that same soft glow waiting at the top like a promise. I did not remember deciding to move, but my feet began to climb one by one, each step slower than the last. The air grew heavier, colder, the whispers grew softer until there was nothing but my own breath echoing in the hollow silence. When I reached the top, the door was already open, the same door from my dreams, the same pale light spilling out across the floor. I stepped inside and saw the bed again, the same bed, the same figure lying there unmoving. I knew before I even looked that it would be me, and when I leaned closer I saw that my reflection was smiling faintly, as if it had been waiting for this moment for years. I reached out to touch it, and the moment my fingers brushed the fabric of the sheet, the whole room shuddered, the walls groaned, and the light flared blinding white. I felt myself falling backward through the air, through silence, through time, and then I was standing in the same room, but everything was wrong. The air was heavier, the color had drained from the world, and the bed was empty. I looked around, calling out, but my voice did not echo. It was swallowed instantly by the quiet. I walked to the mirror on the far wall, and when I looked into it I did not see myself. I saw the room behind me empty still, except for a faint shape standing near the doorway, something tall and still with eyes that gleamed faintly like wet glass, watching. I turned, but there was nothing there, only the slow creak of the floorboards. I began to run through the house, calling out, trying to find a way out. Every door I opened led to another hallway, another flight of stairs, the rooms repeating endlessly, the same furniture, the same windows, the same scent of dust and rain and silence. At some point I stopped running because I realized there was no end. The house was folding in on itself, turning in slow circles like a maze that never stopped shifting. I pressed my hands against the walls and felt them move slightly under my palms, breathing, almost sighing, and in that breath I heard words faint as wind. "Stay," it said, "stay and rest." I fell to my knees, the exhaustion pressing down until I could barely lift my head. I wanted to scream, but even that felt impossible. I crawled to a nearby room and collapsed onto the cold floor, the wood pulsing gently beneath me like a heartbeat, and as my eyes began to close I saw faint lights flickering in the corners, small shapes that might have been people or might have been memories. I saw faces, blurred but familiar, and one of them leaned close and whispered something soft, something that sounded like "welcome home." When I woke again I was in bed, the morning light spilling through the window, soft and golden, and for a moment I thought it had all been a dream. The forest outside was calm, the birds singing, and the house was quiet, almost peaceful. But when I sat up I saw something that froze me. On the table beside the bed was a note written in my own handwriting. It said, "Do not leave, the house needs you," and beneath it a single line that I could not remember writing. It said, "You are the dream and the dreamer both." The days after that blurred together. I no longer kept track of time, the clocks did not move, and the sunlight seemed to linger too long. I spoke to the house and it answered, sometimes in the creak of the stairs, sometimes in the whisper of the curtains, sometimes even in my own voice echoing back from another room. I began to understand that it had always been this way, that the house had been waiting not for me but for something inside me, something I had forgotten somewhere between waking and sleep. I remembered moments now, fragments of another life, a road, a name, a promise to return, and I wondered if maybe I had been part of this place all along. One night I stood before the mirror again and asked the reflection who I was, and it smiled and said, "You are what the house remembers." The lights dimmed and the walls sighed, and I realized that I was no longer afraid. The house had stopped watching me, it was with me, part of me. I could feel its pulse beneath my skin, slow and steady like a second heart. I walked through the rooms and each step left faint ripples of light across the floor, like the house was responding to my presence, breathing me in, accepting me fully. Outside, the forest whispered with wind that sounded almost like distant voices. The moon hung low, casting pale light across the windows, and I saw faint silhouettes moving through the rooms, people maybe, or echoes of those who had come before. They did not frighten me anymore. I felt them like warmth passing through air, like memory returning, and I understood that they were not ghosts, they were dreams that had found shelter here just as I had. When dawn came, I sat by the window watching the first light creep across the sky. The house was silent now, peaceful, almost tender. I closed my eyes and listened to the rhythm of the world outside and the heartbeat beneath me, and they were the same, the house and I breathing together as one. The last thing I remember before drifting into sleep was the faint whisper of my own voice, or maybe the house itself, saying, "Rest now, you are home, you are safe." And in that silence I finally understood that I had never been alone, not for a moment. The house had always been awake, always watching, always waiting, not to trap me but to keep me until I was ready to dream again. And as I fell into that endless quiet, the house exhaled softly as though relieved, and somewhere deep within its walls another heartbeat began to stir.